Chapter 13. The Utilitarian Way. Fat globs and long strings of drool snapped loose from an ear's mouth. Sloppily. The poor bastard had already bitten through both his lips in an earlier effort to resist the torture, to guard his thoughts. Then his body went into spastic convulsions from the pain, and he lost the fight. Lost control. About a meter below his sweat-streaked face, the first third of his tongue lay on the cold, hard-tiled floor, surrounded by an irregular growing web of blood and more drool. Anir would mourn for his loss if he could find the strength to see beyond his suffering, but he'd forgotten what strength was before the drilling was even halfway done. His body now hangs suspended by clamps screwed into the bones of his limbs. Redundant straps and braces restrain him even more. Cables and hoses wind around and through a hemispherical frame above. Anir's naked back, spotted with wire-fed diodes and stuck through with a legion of hypodermic tubes. His skull was removed from the top of his ears up, leaving his brain exposed to the searching probes of the Daedalian tech perched on the work stool in front of his immobilized, opened head. Large goggles cover the front of the tech's face. Enhanced images of Anir's brain roll across the goggles' lenses as the tech carefully inspects every gray curl and twist and fold, micrometer by micrometer. The Daedalian tech pauses. One of its free hands taps out a sequence on the control board off to the side, and some of Anir's living memories flutter across the goggles, replacing the magnified view of the poor man's brain. At the probe monitoring station a short distance away, 3 other techs analyze and record their colleagues' work as Anir's memories play across the large screen in front of them. The Leneshe tech monitoring Anir's physical condition moves forward and bends low to pick up the severed piece of tongue with a pair of hand clamps. The tech drops the bloody bit of flesh into a stasis drawer off to the side as Anir's muscles jerk and spasm in unending agony. Gobs more drool, darker and lighter, flap from his mouth, covering the cold, hard tiles below like an abstract expressionist's painting from an ancient earthland art movement. A Daedalian probe tech detaches itself from the recording and analysis station, walks over to Vor, hovering beside the Science Commission apex, Zes Owarden, and shakes its head. The subject has been at 0 resistance for over 2 hours now, and our preliminary analysis suggests that it has no knowledge of the source of the order for your assassination, Pel Apex Kalina. Vor's consideration of this news is a scraping rumble accompanied by a dim, wavering shimmer at the edges of his kaleidoscopic uncertainty. Human minds prove relatively easy to search once their resistance is nullified by intense pain, and 2 hours of an initial probe is usually enough to get everything the subject remembers from the past year or so. Keep the subject alive and inventory all you can extract for the next week, Vor commands. I will return for a full analysis and report at that time. As you will, Pel Apex. The tech bows respectfully, without the slightest hesitation, and walks back to its station with no hint of how it feels about the retired Gixon's request for the unnecessarily thorough probe. The human knows nothing. Apex Commissioner Owarden chuckles as she motions Vor towards the room's exit with a domino tumbling of her polygonal perplexity. Her amusement is a deep, crunching noise. A cool glow infuses the maddening assemblage of the Commissioner's irregular angles and twisted planes, while countless bright sparks of bioluminescence flash into view and then slowly fade back into her softly incandescent accumulation.
A week?
The old Commissioner exclaims.
I suppose you'll want to view the creature's fuzzy memories of its own birth, then.
Vor folds into the air to angle away from his captive with humor in his voice, but the intermittent flash of rings around each of his 15 fitful eyes clearly reveals his underlying frustration. I am glad you find this amusing, he counters.
And to think, you once questioned why they called you the Salaku Droon.
Zess laughs as she follows him through the exit's projected barrier out into Nevagaim's hot, color-filled skies. Having been Vor's superior for most of his military career, Zess could never seem to stop treating him like a lovable subordinate, despite their equal rank, his reputation as a strategic genius, and his status as a cultural hero.
I haven't seen you this worked up since the first time that Daedalian sent you running like a wounded Deshna back in 33-5.
Zess quips. Vor laughs at the memory. The multitudinous faces of his conspicuous disorientation turn reflective. The image returned in them is of a sky gone mad as he and Zess clear the outer structures of the Science Commission's floating complex.
You mention my youthful failings each time I ask for your counsel,
Vor complains.
And you only ask for my counsel?
Zess's playfulness carries a serious undertone.
When you find yourself at the limits of your considerable ability to tolerate impenetrable problems, when you are on the verge of some rash and amateurish action.
Zess mimics the reflective quality of Vor's uncertain warping. Vor responds, becoming serious as Zess's words bring his mind back to his current concerns.
These last 2 assassination attempts were too well planned and too well supported. My would-be killers had information they should not have had, such as the locations of most of my chateau, the location of the human Chiolem's homeworld, access to Chiolem's Eidolon, and restricted military-grade equipment.
Yes. I've read your report,
Zess responds as the two of them, mentor and pupil, allow themselves to be swept into Nevagaim's endless gales.
Then how can you not share my concerns?
Vor retorts with annoyance. Embarrassment quickly follows, but the brightness of his short-lived outburst lingers as a smoldering ember below each of his 15 shifting eyes. He avoids the corresponding 15 points of his mentor's calculating gaze.
I simply remind you not to let your frustrations undermine your normally sound judgment,
Zess warns with no small amount of condescension.
I remind you not to waste your energies on fruitless tasks,
she says, in reference to the captive assassin's pointlessly thorough mind probe. She pauses thoughtfully as the two of them angle into a high-latitude jet stream to be whisked away from the slower-churning subarctic clouds of the third band.
You need to be clear-headed regarding this mystery, Vor. Even if it turns out to be nothing more than someone's misguided personal grudge. Though I fear your unknown adversary speaks to a threat that concerns all the heirs of creation.
Zess ends her statement with an intimate definition of their species. While considering her counsel, Vor spies a flight of Ainawas a few kilometers ahead. His mirrored accretion expands on instinct. A hunt is precisely what he needs right now. Yes, a pleasant diversion to relax his mind, to help him focus.
Think of these attempts on your life. Think of how bold they have been,
Zess resumes.
Far bolder, I imagine, than they would have been with any of your active contemporaries.
Returning to a near-transparent state, Vor closes in on his prey, a nightmarish fleet of twisted plains, sky, and cloud, as absorbed with the hunt as he is with his mentor's concerned analysis.
You must keep in mind that the sharp edge of your reputation has dulled in the decades since your retirement. Many of these lesser beings weren't even born when you were an active apex. You can no longer rely on the mere mention of your name to make our enemies panic and falter.
One of the gliding creatures at the rear of the flight of Ainawas spots Vor's approach and lets loose a cry of warning to the rest of its group. An elder, fat and slow with age. An amused light shimmers across the surface of Vor's hyaloid aggregation despite the grave tone of his conversation. He is far too close to the Ainuas and moving much too fast for the old one's warning to mean much of anything for the rest of them, especially those in the rear. Zess expands her own fragmentation and realigns herself with Nevagaim's magnetosphere to gain altitude and speed.
You must shake the lethargy of retirement from your mind if you are to survive and resolve this,
she cautions.
I highly doubt your adversary will stop at 2 unsuccessful attempts on your life.
Vor climbs rapidly above the panicked flight of creatures just before Zess. He folds along the planet's magnetic lines of force at top speed, aiming to exhaust himself until he is too tired to feel, too tired to care. And once exhausted, he can approach this problem of his attempted assassinations from a place of cool logic and heed the wisdom of his mentor's analyses without feeling like a scolded child. Zess climbs beside him as Vor stuns the slow Ainua elder with a focused burst of radiation from his core. The Pale Apex then descends upon the creature with haste, and clusters around it tightly to accelerate the disintegration of its soft, rubbery flesh. With Zess's words fresh in his mind, Vor concentrates on micronizing the squirming, shrieking creature into a digestible mist. With the first lusty inhale of his prize, it occurs to Vor that he is most likely viewed by his assassins as he himself views this Ainua, fat and slow with age. An easy target, perfectly suited to test their strategies on, until at last they succeed. Then, and only then, when their methods are thoroughly worked out, will they advance upon the rest of his kind. Zess is right. The thought stills the Pale Apex with terrible apprehension. He sincerely hopes these attempts on his life aren't being orchestrated by Chiolem, because if they are, well, he stops this line of thought before his unease grows too big from the fear of it. Zess, in the meanwhile, angles across the boundaries of the Science Commission's restricted skies. With 2 Ainuas captive and boiling within her kaleidoscopic embrace, she takes a satisfied look in Vor's direction to see her pupil folding aimlessly on the winds, lost in thought. His atomized Ainua blowing away in a bright green mist by the eternal winds of Nevagaim's endless sky.